Also notice Fritz here behind me has its alloy wheels on it. You know, it's quite a bit different, but those are the wheels that the public chose, okay? So I'm going to lower the car down now, and I'm going to show you the other European headlight I polished up before we get into the engine compartment. Look at how my paint job turned out on these alloy wheels using my kit that we've developed over the years. Now that's just a single stage silver paint, but it's really important the type of primer and prep that you do to get it to look this nice. Now I'm going to roll in real quick the factory alloy that I showed you a while back that has never been on the road, and you can see how similar those are. For a daily driver, what do you think? One of the favorite things that I put on old Fritz here is a magnetic pan drain bolt. I know what you're thinking, oh, that's no big deal. You know, let's just put a little magnet down there. Maybe it'll pick up a few particles of metal that are in the engine oil. But look at this. You cannot believe I'm going to use that around the shop just for a magnet to pick up stuff. Can you believe that little teeny bolt magnet will hold that entire ratchet wrench and socket? That's really some magnet. So I got to show you this because I'm really impressed. You know, I went to town on the other headlight, and this time I did some extensive polishing on the glass. Look at that. Doesn't that look nice? I'm pretty pleased how this headlight came out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and pull the air filter housing, and we're going to pull this valve cover. This will be real interesting because I'm pulling the valve cover for 3 reasons. Number 1, I want to see the condition of the engine, the general health. You know, how much sludge has been built up in the engine. What are we going to see in there? Then I want to check the condition of the camshafts. Do we have scoring on the camshafts? Because that could be a problem on these engines. And then, of course, finally, I want to do a valve adjustment, and I'll do a video, and we'll decide whether or not we need to develop a special tool to make a valve adjustment on these M110 engines any easier. And we'll also be pulling the valve cover off of Fritz, the turbo diesel over there, and doing a valve adjustment on that engine as well. So I'm going to roll up my sleeves, get out the tools. We'll come in here and I'll let you watch as I pull the valve cover off old Fritz here. The first thing I'm going to do is use compressed air to blow this area off. When I pull this valve cover, I don't want any dirt falling down it. We'll get this air filter housing off. It's pretty easy on this engine. There are some things that are easy to work on and other things that are very difficult. You're going to get to see that probably later on. But I've got these 3 wing nuts to remove. I can lift this off. I'll go ahead and pull this breather off. Okay, we'll get these plug wires out. Look at that special grabber tool I developed, how well it works. You don't want to pull on the rubber parts of these wires. You want to make sure you grab the metal. You can damage them. And this last one I can just leave on for the valve cover. I'll just go ahead and move it out of the way like this. There you have it. It's not too bad. You know, my hunch is maybe this head's been off because this thing is really clean. Take a look. Now this has to be one of the cleanest M110 engines I've ever seen inside the valve train assembly. This is really clean. The cam lobes are absolutely beautiful. There's no scoring on any of the lobes. Look at how tight that chain is. Conditions of the sprockets. There's no sludge buildup anywhere. And the oil is fairly clean that's down in here. So you can imagine how happy I am. But there's another point I want to make here, because somebody asked me about that engine pan that we pulled off, and he said, well, what about all that emulsification that's down in that oil? All that water, you know, looked like it got in the oil. So you're thinking, uh-oh, maybe that's a sign of a blown head gasket or other some sort of coolant leak into the engine. Well, if I had problems with that, when I pull this valve cover, I would have seen that white gooey oil, you know, along in through here too as well. Because of the condition of the upper part of the engine, the lack of any evidence of water in the oil, I think most of that was caused by storage problems. This car, you know, sat for years and didn't get driven very much. And of course, you just start up an engine and don't drive it very much, you get condensation in the engine and it drips down into the oil pan. So I'm very confident after looking at this that I don't have any problem with water getting into the oil in this engine. I want to show you the calipers we replaced on Fritz. These are pretty nasty. I mean, you know, the brakes were kind of working. If you recall maybe that second episode where I did a quick brake test, you know, got in, hit the pedal, pushed the car, and it wasn't sticking at the time. Well, you're going to get to see why. The brakes were kind of half working, and this is really important. You need to understand, if you get one of these old cars, you have to pull the pads out to do a full brake inspection. Of course, when I pulled the pads out, look at this rear one that hadn't been replaced. This piston on this side was totally frozen, okay, but this piston here is working. Same one on this one. One piston is working, one piston, no way it's moving. So that's why I had such a problem with overheated rotors, and the rotors were out of true because the pads had been dragging. Now this front caliper did move a little bit, just a little bit. No, that one's tough. Of course, this side you can see it's moving a little bit more. So I decided to go ahead and replace both these calipers. I always replace calipers in pairs, even if one is working, quote unquote, because it may not be far behind. So I'm sure the question here is, hey Kent, why didn't you rebuild these? Well, for me it's a time factor, but these are rebuildable, particularly if I can get the pistons out. So maybe in a future episode, I'm going to get the old pressure machine out and we're going to pop these pistons out and look at them and talk about whether these three were rebuildable or not. You can probably see why I have this big smile on my face. It's not every day that you'll pull a valve cover off a 37-year-old car and it's going to look like this one did right here. Man, this tool is something else. Wait until you find out about it. It does things that I've not... It does things in dealing with rusty bolts and screws that you just can't believe, okay?